Today, Nick and I are down in Kentucky taking a look at what Ford calls the all-new 2025 Ford Expedition, but it really seems like more of a significant refresh than it does a brand new model. One of the first things you look for on a new model is going to be a facelift, and that's exactly what we have here. And it's a fairly smooth design, but stays nice and wide. So the size of this vehicle is not one you're ever going to underestimate. But depending on which trim package you get, you are going to get some pretty different accenting pieces here, and that can change the appearance quite a bit. We have the platinum trim, but with the stealth performance package, which means we get a lot more black here than you get in some other trims. And one we'll touch on a little bit more specifically later is going to be that Tremor, where you get some of those orange accents.
Now, as Travis mentioned, our platinum trim does have the stealth performance package, which will set you back around $6,500. A pretty penny to say the least, but I think it is well worth the cost. Now, in the front, you're going to get that more stealth, like blacked out look with a front grille lighting going across the front of the vehicle, blacked out headlights, and a blacked out front fascia. But that appearance package carries on through the side of the vehicle, where if you didn't want to go for the performance aspect, you can get the appearance package and still get these beautiful 22-inch magnetite painted wheels with the red calipers poking through there. Now, these wheels are paired with a 275/50 R22 Michelin, making sure that you put all of the power to the ground. Now, speaking of power and performance, the stealth performance package, it's a pretty penny, yes, but it will also get you better performance, not only in the suspension department with continuous active dampers, but you can also get the highest output under the hood. So let's talk about that here for a second. Now, the reason why that stealth performance package is so expensive is not only do you get more power under the hood, you get 440 horsepower and 510 pound-feet of torque, but you also get a high-performance exhaust system out back to make sure that this 3.5-liter V6 sings the way it should sing. Now, this is paired to Ford's 10-speed automatic transmission, and you can expect to get around 22 miles per gallon out on the highway when you're just cruising, but if you want to hear those pretty ponies, you can expect a lot less.
If you don't get this platinum with the performance package, the only way to get the higher output of the 3.5 V6 is going to be with the Tremor. Everything else, meaning really the active and the King Ranch, is only going to come with the standard output. So you just have to make sure you know what you want when you're clicking those option packages. One thing we haven't seen before on an Expedition like this is going to be this black panel, which unfortunately right now shows just how dirty we got this on the way over here. Sorry about that, folks. Ran into a rainstorm, not a whole lot we could do about it. But Nick, what is this black piece here for? Because I gotta be honest, I'm not sure I really love it.
Yeah, it looks a little strange, especially when paired to this green paint color, but it's there to accentuate the main selling point that might be what is swaying you to go Expedition rather than maybe a Tahoe, Wagoneer, something of that nature, and that is the new split gate. So what that is let me go ahead and demonstrate it for you. If you go ahead and press this button, the top portion of the rear hatch will open, and it's almost like a truck tailgate where this lower portion stays down. Now, the reason being is they want to be a little bit more utility focused, and if you have things rolling around loose back here, soccer balls, anything spherical, or even wine bottles, usually if you've had this happen to you, know exactly what I'm talking about. When you open up your rear hatch and it opens directly upward, you can't really control what flows out or what drops out of the back. Has that happened to you, Travis?
Yeah, it's definitely happened before, but the other thing that we get is a little bit more usable space. So if we fold that second piece down, we now have the tailgate, which is what you normally get on a truck, and very, very, very few SUVs out there, especially here in North America, but we now have one here. And as Nick demonstrated, this will hold about 500 pounds.
I'm not 500 pounds, Travis.
No, but Nick and I both could sit on here pretty comfortably, and where we live, getting out of the rain is not a bad thing. So This is our storage space, but we have one of the biggest cars out there on the market today. There's just a little bit more to it. So Nick, tell us about this space and what we can do with it.
Yeah, so the cargo space is a little bit lackluster in terms of behind third row, but it is very useful. Now, you not only have charging ports back there, you have a little bit of underfloor storage, but this is not going to be best in class behind third row storage, or even second row, or even first row.
I have put these seats up just to show you one more trick feature here in 2025. I'll ask my lovely assistant Nick to do some of the button pressing for me here. But for the keen-eyed viewer, you may have noticed that this was not a 60-40 split. It's actually a 40-20-40 split. The standard seat arrangement is going to be 60-40, but you can get this optional third row, which means that we can fold this down and get a pass-through. Now, something like a ski pass-through is not uncommon in the world of SUVs, but in a three-row SUV, I can't think of a single one off the top of my head that has a 40-20-40 split rear. But when this is down, it doesn't fold all the way flat. But it does have a dual hinge system. So if Nick folds that back up here, and then we fold those seats down, again, just like you saw earlier, this will fold all the way down and flat. So it's kind of the best of all worlds. Last party trick, the reason we didn't show you the underfloor here is because there's not a whole lot going on. But the reason for that is because there's a really fun accessory that comes with this.
Yep, this plastic floor is found underneath this rear portion. And you can put these little plastic hooks down here in the rear cargo area and lock that into place. All four corners locked down, and you have a little bit of a table. Now, when that third row is up, let's go ahead and get those up. You can set things on here, divide it upper and lower, or even if you wanted to, you can unlatch that, fold that down, and that becomes a little bit of a backrest. Kind of a cool multi-function feature that you don't find in many other SUVs. And it just kind of gives you some extra use out of your rear cargo area. And as we mentioned, it doesn't have the most volume back here, but it is the most functional. Right behind me is the first ever Expedition Tremor. Now you might be thinking to yourself, why would you need a full-size 3-row SUV in a off-road configuration? Well, Ford really does it well. They do their off-road orientations well, and it's not just a visual package, it is a killer functionality package as well. Now you get some different parts up front that make it a little bit more well known that it is a Tremor trim, the Electric Spice logo and tow hooks down below, but you also get functionality. So if Travis comes over to the side, we got 33-inch general grabber tires wrapping around a Tremor specific wheel. We have off-road tuned suspension that gets us 2 extra inches of ground clearance, giving us 10.6 inches of ground clearance, class leading for a 3-row SUV. We get rock rail protectors, and underneath the vehicle, we also get skid plates. Pretty good skid plates at that. We definitely got to test them today. You get an engine skid plate, an optional transmission skid plate, gas tank, differential, and transfer case. So it's well protected underneath. Now this paint is a little bit dirty, as you can see. We got a little muddy, kept traction very well, and it's just an overall fantastic trim.
We showed you the Expedition, but this is the Expedition Max. And really the only difference between these models is going to be found in the very back as far as the overall length. Any of the other visual tweaks you see are mostly going to be based on the trim level, which has a lot of the same trims, not the specific model itself. So the fact that this front end is a little bit different is because we have a King Ranch. And actually, one of my favorite things about the King Ranch is probably going to be these wheels. I don't know if I love it in every color, but here in this darker gray, absolutely fantastic. The only other difference I think that really is worth pointing out on the Expedition Max versus, again, your standard Expedition, is there is no Tremor version of the Max. So that means if you want the higher performance engine, there's only one way you can do it, and that's getting the Platinum version with either the performance package or the ultimate package. And that's what's going to give you that extra performance. But the reason you would get the Max is for the extra storage capacity. And as we mentioned, Nick, I think you've got that for us here. There's a little bit more when it comes to the storage room.
Yeah, in terms of cargo capacity, it's about 15 extra cubic feet behind the third row, second row, and behind the first row. So if you want the maximum cargo capacity, the Max is going to be your best bet. But like I said, with the non-Max, if you want the most cargo capacity, still the Tahoe or the Suburban is going to offer more. Travis and I have taken a King Ranch trim hostage to show you a little bit of a different take on what an Expedition interior can look like for you if you wanted to go for that premium, different colored functionality. Now, on the King Ranch, unfortunately, you're not able to get the massage seats. If you go for the Platinum and go for the Ultimate package, yes, it's going to cost quite a bit more money, but you are going to get that functionality of getting your massage while driving down the road. But here in the King Ranch, you have pretty good adjustability both in the seat bottom and seat back. Unfortunately, it is not a 4-way lumbar. It is only 2-way adjusted here by power buttons on the side. And the biggest thing that I don't like necessarily, or something I have to get used to, is the steering column. It is all adjusted by buttons in the menu system. To adjust it, you press this top left button and adjust it through there, but I'm going to show you a little bit deeper and a closer look on how to use that here in just a second as we do a deeper dive.
Here in the second row with this seat set for Nick up front, I have tons of legroom, but a lot of that has to do with the fact that the second row is adjustable. So this is on sliders, so I can slide it all the way to the point that I'm completely out of legroom. I would be jammed in his back here, but look how much room I opened up in the back. So you can adjust this depending on how many, well, really people you have of varying heights and lengths, so you can actually make sure there's room for just about everyone. But with this all the way back, like I said, tons of room. I also have a pretty comfortable seat. Now this is the captain's chairs configuration. You're gonna find that, I think, on most of them, not just most of the trims, but most of the units sold. And they also come with a nice thick, wide armrest here. Actually, the width of this is surprising. You know, normally it's a pretty thin little thing, but talking about a pretty wide armrest. Of our group, I am definitely the one with the tallest torso. I run out of the headroom the fastest, and I have maybe about an inch or so, but again, for me, who is used to running out of headroom, the fact that I have some is plenty. And we have this moonroof closed just so that we can get a better camera view, but with that open, things feel pretty nice and open here. Now we've got Nick here in the third row, and the question I have, Nick, how is the space and how are the amenities?
The space is actually pretty good. Now you have your seat scooted forward just a little bit because it is on rails, so you can scoot it forward and backwards. You still have plenty of legroom up there, plenty of headroom, and I have plenty of legroom and headroom back here in the third row. Now, keep in mind we are in the Max King Ranch, so it is going to be the longer version of the Expedition, but that does not mean that you get extra legroom. The legroom in the third row, second row, and first row all stay the same from your regular to the Max, and that is not the same in the Suburban versus Tahoe. It does increase that third row just a tiny bit when you go to the larger Suburban, but not here in the Max. But overall, I have more than enough legroom to be comfortable. You also have a power recline function that is over here on this C-pillar. Headroom, I still have about a ½ inch above my head, and I am sitting perfectly up straight. If I slouch a little bit, it's very comfortable. Now, if you are back here with somebody else over on the driver's side, you can fold down this 20% of the back third row and have a little bit of an armrest and a separation between you and the other person. It's very comfortable. Amenities are plenty back here. 2 USB-Cs, 2 cup holders on each side, and as I mentioned, power recline. Your vents are up here, a microphone to broadcast your voice up front. Plenty of amenities to make it comfortable for a shorter or even a longer drive.
I think we've got 15 cup holders in here.
It's crazy.
And what's funny is I don't even have a power recline. I got to use a manual over here. So I mean, what an interesting world we live in. Before I hop all the way in, one of the first things you'll notice is that there is not only a lot of water provided here for this trip, but also a lot of opportunity to store that. Ford says that these pockets can now hold a 24-ounce water bottle, though unfortunately we didn't bring any with us to go ahead and check that out. And we are going to be here in the King Ranch, which is really the most upscale looking, and it comes with this Del Rio leather. It's a nice dark brown leather. You'll find that here along the armrest. You'll find it across some of the dashboard, a couple different versions of it there in the seat. And one thing I love here is we got a really nice brown wood. We don't get as much wood in cars these days as we used to. It may not be everyone's favorite, but we also get some nice brown stitching that runs along this door. Here in this model, we have the upgraded sound system. So this is one of those 22 Bang & Olufsen speakers. But we've got Nick here to show us a couple things about the rest of this interior. Nick, give us a tour.
Yeah, so first thing to kind of bounce off of what you said, no piano black up here in any of the high touch areas, which is a huge thumbs up for me because piano black is very, I mean, there's piano black around here, but that's a nice accent piece. If this was all piano black, scratch galore. So you have that nice open pore wood and a kind of a different type of wood in different trims. So like the Tremor gets a more grayish type wood and the Platinum gets a different color. It's a very nice accentuation to the interior color, especially here on the King Ranch. But overall, as you can see, we have lots of screen real estate. So let's start off with that because that is a major change for the 25 model year. We still have our infotainment down here, a landscape portrait or landscape design. So this is a 13.2 inch display. And then right above that, this is taking place as both your gauge cluster as well as more information and your heads up display. That is a 24 inch, what they call a panoramic display, and a configurable middle section to where you can put your media up there, your off-road telemetry, things of that nature, and it all is all controlled from the infotainment system itself. Now, I talked earlier, or I'm going to talk about how to adjust the steering column is all adjusted from some haptic touch buttons. So let's touch on that real quick because that is probably my least favorite thing about this new model year. So in order to adjust your steering wheel, you're gonna have to click on this. It is touch sensitive, so you go ahead and move that around. You can see that moving. To adjust your steering wheel, you press the top left, you scroll to the top middle, and you can adjust up, adjust down, move it outward, and push it back in. Now there is more controls throughout this system. You can just press back, and once you get used to it, it is a little bit easier to use. You have your pedal adjustments as well, but it's just something that's strange at first. But again, like I said, you can get used to it pretty quickly. Now on the left side of the steering wheel of this very oblong, squarish, ovalish steering wheel, you have your Blue Cruise or your cruise control settings over here. And as you see, it is touch sensitive as well. So you press that and that will set the Blue Cruise if it is available on that road. You have your monitoring system here. It's very sensitive, as me and Travis experienced on our hour-and-a-half drive. If you are squinting because of sunlight, it will think you're looking away and start beeping at you and eventually kick you off of Blue Cruise. So that is something to be said. It is a little finicky at times, but overall about an hour's worth of Blue Cruise, it worked perfectly. Now I love this low dashboard and that panoramic display. Travis, what's your take on that?
You know, it's a different way to do it. There's a lot of screens in cars these days, and every manufacturer is laying them out a little bit differently. So what we get here is something in a multi-tiered layout. It actually is somewhat reminiscent, of the Nautilus and what we find now in the Navigator. They've taken what is the same screen kind of layout, and they've cut it in half. So instead of spanning across the entire way, we're just getting this layered look. But there's enough information on this screen, and I think they're able to put the things that matter up there. So we are able to configure this kind of middle section here. Right now it's just showing our music, but we can put things like your fuel economy. You can put your tire pressure, towing status. We may get a chance to tow with this in just a little bit. Off-road status, that's something that is gonna pop up when you are in something like the Tremor in your off-road mode. That's gonna pop up there as well. And then on the other side, one of the most important things in this day and age is gonna be your navigation. So you can get your navigation up in front of you instead of having a heads-up display that can do your turn-by-turn directly in front of your line of sight. This is, to me, close enough, but it's just not too much screen real estate. The number here is 24, but the functional space is not intrusive, and so I really, really appreciate that. The only thing for me is that in this area here, it's a little bit barren. There isn't a whole lot going on, and you can change themes, but the theme change is not the quickest thing in the world, and it also doesn't make that much of an impact that we've found so far. So because this can continue to be software updated, I'd love to see a little bit more of that, but a lot of the software is baked into here, the infotainment screen. So it's not just about that top screen, that's kind of the more functional one, but you do have everything you need in here. So we have Nick's phone connected, so we're using Apple CarPlay. If we click that CarPlay button, you can see we're making good use of the screen, and we can adjust things as we need to, as you'd expect. We also were able to do Android Auto on my phone, and if we go full screen there, we get just a little bit more space. So amongst all the options here in the Expedition, the engine is only a 3.5 V6. The question is it the standard output or the high output? Nick, unfortunately, somehow we ended up with the high output.
Yeah,
what'd you think of it?
It's awesome. It's awesome. I'm glad we ended up with this vehicle. Now this is 440 horsepower, 510 pound-feet of torque, as I mentioned, about 40 more horsepower, and just about 30 more pound-feet of torque than what you get in the non-performance engine variant. But honestly, I don't know if you could really feel the difference. I haven't driven that one back to back with this, but I will say that the performance in such a large vehicle is pretty awesome.
We got this thing 0 to 60 in 5.9 seconds pretty consistently, and that's with us and a couple, pieces of gear, so certainly not a test track situation. And considering, yes, we have what they're calling the performance package, but it's not a new engine, it's not a lightweight model. This is hardly a performance car. Under 6 seconds is impressive. And what's more impressive to me is actually how the vehicle handled this acceleration, but not just acceleration. If you want to push a little bit harder, it does a pretty good job handling itself in the corners as long as you have your settings set correctly. So those drive modes are going to be important. You put it in sport, that's obviously going to help you get the best 0 to 60 time, but also going to make sure your adaptive dampers are working for you. And when you have them there, this handles pretty nicely.
Yeah, in the normal driving mode, I would say it's a little boaty for my taste. In sport mode, it does tighten up. The steering does get a little bit tighter as well, as in that normal mode, not only is it floating the suspension sense, but the steering is pretty vague. There is a lot of play in that steering wheel, but obviously everything is electronically controlled. So you go ahead and put it into sport mode, everything tightens up, and you get a little bit more performance out of an overall luxurious riding vehicle. Now, unfortunately, out here in Louisville, right outside of Louisville, at least in Kentucky, there's not a lot of roads where you could confidently and safely go 60 miles per hour and slam on these brakes. Yeah. But the brakes overall in an everyday driving situation feel pretty good. I'm not too mad at them. Usually Ford is kind of hit or miss for me in terms of braking. I have found that on some Ford vehicles, definitely on the smaller end of what they have in their lineup, like the Maverick, that's where I noticed it most, is a very grabby pedal. When you first initiate that brake, it's almost like they gave too much feedback or too much signal to the computer and just grabs those brakes a little hard. This, however, stops the vehicle in a pretty gradual manner, confident, inspiring, like everybody says, confident, inspiring, but it really does go to what this vehicle can do.
Now, one of the things about the overall driving experience is that one of the things you get out of an Expedition and a lot of Ford models these days is that you don't have to do all the driving per se. Now, Nick here is changing lanes with the touch of a turn signal and everything happens on its own. So Blue Cruise is here, it's the 1.4 version, and they have made a couple changes to that to make sure that the system keeps updating, and it will continue to update beyond here. We don't know exactly when and how quickly they roll out. It's a little bit strange there in the Blue Cruise world how those things happen, but the big changes here are that when you make small adjustments yourself, so for example, if you want to navigate around a pothole that the car doesn't recognize, it'll let you do that, and then you can settle back in, take your hands off without having to re-engage the system. That's really nice.
Yeah, Blue Cruise is something that I haven't really used a whole lot, to be completely honest with you. And it really is I actually used it in the Lightning a while back, and it's improved greatly to now. I mean, the initiation's almost instant. It's a lot better than it used to be. I feel like there's more roads you can use it on. Now we have cameras underneath the mirror, so when we do hit that blinker, it brings up a side camera so we can see if anybody's in our blind spot. Just overall, a really pleasant driving experience, and it really does play a part in reducing the fatigue of those longer road trips.
All right, so now we find ourselves in a Tremor model, and it is time to get this thing off-road. There's some pretty good goodies here. Nick, tell us what we get here in the Tremor that's helping make this a whole lot easier.
Yes, the first thing that you're going to notice here out on this muddy surface is the traction, because we do have some pretty beefy all-terrain tires, 33-inch, which is nearly class-leading, if not class-leading all-terrains here in this full-size SUV market. And then we also have some tuned suspension that's going to be about 2 inches higher ground clearance than what we're going to find on your standard Expedition. So 10.6 inches of ground clearance rather than 8.6.
Yeah, plenty.
So we have plenty of space to get over obstacles, the tires to keep the traction down. And if you happen to find the extent of the ground clearance or the travel and you smack the bottom of the vehicle, there are skid plates underneath there to make sure that you don't damage any vital components of the vehicle itself. Now, there is supposedly an optional skid plate that you can get for the transmission. So that means you're going to get your front skid plate underneath your front bumper and a little bit further back for your engine. You can have the transmission covered. You can have the transfer case and the rear differential and the gas tank. So pretty much the whole underneath of the vehicle is going to be protected. So if you wanted to really kick this in the butt and go real hardcore off-road, you can do that and be protected.
Yeah, I think most people aren't probably going to be even doing a trail quite like we are. I mean, this is not the most difficult, but especially with the mud here, right? This is not the vehicle that I would think to take, but it means that you can, right?
Yeah.
Besides some of the really cool like electric spice accents here, it just feels like we're in the regular Expedition, and I actually kind of appreciate that. But one thing you don't get on the regular Expedition is going to be all of these camera views. Hopefully you can see them here on camera. So we can cycle through a number of these. Right now we've got the overhead. Nick, if you don't mind swiping through a couple of them so I can keep us on the trail while we're losing some camera views. But this is going to help make this really big vehicle seem a lot easier to manage. We already had a couple tight turns that we had to navigate, and having things like cameras directly over the wheels so we could see exactly where we were on the edge there and make sure we don't go over the edge, super helpful.
Yeah, no, one of the big selling points of getting the Tremor over something else, another Expedition putting all-terrain tires and skid plates on it yourself, is the fact that it comes standard with a 373 rear locking differential. It's electronic locking, so when you put it into your off-road mode or even your rock crawling mode, it will go into four-wheel drive high and lock that rear differential so you can put as much traction or as much power down to that off-road surface.
And it's not just that, but we also have some other driver aids like the one-pedal drive mode, which folks might often hear in terms of electric vehicles, but here in the off-road mode, what that allows you to do is accelerate and brake just with a single pedal, and that's going to help ideally smooth things out a little bit. Probably not going to be to everyone's flavor, but they can turn it on or off, but that just means that throttle modulation makes crawling up and down a little bit easier.
Now this is really going to be where those larger tires kind of protecting those wheels, the thicker sidewalls, and those skid plates underneath are going to come into play. Now, as Travis is absolutely bombing up this hill, we're looking at 20 degrees incline. Rear locking differential is engaged, and we're up. What's nice about the one pedal drive is that if he was going up that and needed to reestablish himself and kind of resituate, he can let off that gas pedal and it'll apply the brakes by itself thanks to the one pedal drive. So it kind of simplifies things for the driver, and it makes it a little bit safer as well.
Yeah, and the whole thing is just a little bit more controlled, and we've got a lot of vehicle to move and a lot of slipping and sliding going on, but everything manages itself pretty well. But you were talking about the other trims, or like every vehicle has an off-road trim, and I'll be honest, I won't throw a bunch of people under the bus right now. We might save that one for the podcast, so tune into that later. But there are a lot of different ways you can do an off-road trim, and some of them are tire changes. Some of them are just appearance packages, and some of them do a lot more when it comes to, you know, beefing up things like your transmission coolers and giving you more of a lift and changing some of the programming. This is done quite a bit here. This is not just a sticker pack.
Now I'm going to say something, and I'm not saying this because there's a Ford employee sitting behind us, but I will give Ford their kudos, because when they do something, they do it to an extreme, whether it be high performance or off-road. They have a Raptor R. It's what, almost 800 horsepower or something like that, or 700. something like that. Way too much horsepower.
Lots.
Great suspension, just fantastic off-road. And then even with all of the Tremors, whether it's heavy duty, F-150, they even have a Tremor for the Maverick, now the Expedition. Ford just really does a good job in making sure that what they're doing is going to be done well, and really industry leading too. So
admittedly, I wouldn't think there's a huge market for a full-size SUV like this to need an off-road package, but apparently there is, and folks are probably going to look to this who won't use it to its full extent, but appreciate having things like more ground clearance. It's a little bit better stability in the more adverse weather conditions, that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's 80% of the off-road scene now, is how good can your vehicle look on road without having to take it off-road. So if someone wanted to go stock for stock and buy an Expedition Tremor, they can do that now. So that's a great option. But if you wanted to use it for off-road, it's great at doing that as well.
And for folks who have already been doing this, now you get factory coverage with it. So warranties abound. So if you find yourself either wanting or needing a vehicle as large as the Expedition or even the Expedition Max, the good news is that these are available on sale at your local dealer right now. But what you pay is about as large of a gap as the Expedition itself, and I mean that in the Max version, because any Expedition starts at $63,995. That's going to be the active trim without the Max. If you max out any of these Expeditions, add $3,000 to that total price, which already does include that delivery fee, but you can't add a Max to a Tremor because the Tremor is Expedition only. Now, from that active, where there are a number of packages available, it's going to be a big bump up to the Platinum, starting at $76,425. Now, that's a big bump, but that's not where the Platinum maxes out. Because if you want the high output engine like we were driving earlier, that starts with a $65,445 increase. That's $6,545 for the Stealth Performance package, meaning that you're floating right around that $83,000 mark, which is where you'll start on the Tremor. And the Tremor has that engine standard. But there's a more expensive Platinum. It's a Platinum Ultimate package, and that starts with a $13,000 price bump over that already $76,000 roundabout $5,000. What I have here is a King Ranch, and the King Ranch starts more expensive than the Platinum, but it doesn't really end more expensive than the Platinum, and you can't get the higher output engine here, either in the Max or the regular Expedition. And so there's a lot of different ways to do this. I'm mostly curious to find out which way you would order yours, because I'm a little bit torn. Do I want or need the higher output engine? Do I really need the Ultimate package? If you want 24-inch wheels, that's how you get them, is the Ultimate package on your Platinum. Or do you really need to max out the practicality? And that's where you're leaning hard into the active trims, getting 8 seats and making the most out of the space available. Thank you so much for watching. Let us know down in the comments below what you think. If you want to hear more about some of these trips or get a deeper dive into some other automotive comparisons, you can find us on our podcast. That's the Auto Buyer's Guide podcast, either on your favorite podcast station or right here on YouTube. Stay safe, enjoy some sunny weather, and we'll see you down the road.